In the harsh winter of 1886 Wyoming Territory, three strangers' lives collided in the most dangerous way possible. Kate Reynolds thought she was protecting her 7-year-old daughter by hiding her true identity, but some secrets are too explosive to stay buried. When former Pinkerton detective Tom McKenzie discovered what Kate was really running from their quiet refuge became ground zero for a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of territorial power. This is the story of how a desperate mother, a guilt-ridden lawman, and a brave little girl took on corrupt forces that would stop at nothing to silence them. Set against the unforgiving beauty of the American frontier, it's a tale of justice, redemption, and the families we choose when blood fails us. What starts as a simple rescue becomes a deadly game of cat and mouse. What begins as survival becomes something worth fighting for. And what seems like the end of hope becomes the beginning of everything they never knew they wanted. If you love stories of courage against impossible odds, please hit that like button and subscribe for more heartwarming tales of the American West. They're still following you. Single mother's secret identity puts them all in deadly danger. The sound of hoofbeats on frozen ground cut through the November night like gunshots. Kate Reynolds pulled her daughter closer against her chest as their stolen horse stumbled on the icy trail, its breath steaming in the bitter cold. "Mama, I'm scared," 7-year-old Lily whispered, her small voice lost in the wind that howled down from the Bighorn Mountains. "I know, sweetheart. Just hold tight." Kate's eyes swept the darkness behind them. 3 riders, maybe 4. They'd been following since Cheyenne, gaining ground with every mile. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Trust no one. The documents must reach the territorial governor." But the territorial governor was 200 miles north, and their pursers were closing fast. The horse stumbled again, nearly throwing them both. Kate felt the animal's exhaustion in every labored breath. They wouldn't make it another mile at this pace. Ahead, a dim light flickered through the trees, smoke rising from a chimney. Civilization, or at least the hope of it. Kate made a decision born of desperation. She guided the horse toward the light, praying she wasn't leading them into worse danger. The cabin sat in a small clearing, modest but well-maintained. A lean man emerged from the shadows as they approached, rifle in hand, but pointed toward the ground. Even in the darkness, Kate could see the caution in his stance, the way he moved like someone who'd learned not to trust easily. "Easy there," he called out, his voice steady. "You folks lost." Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew closer. Kate's heart hammered against her ribs. "Please," she said, sliding down from the horse with Lily in her arms. "They're following us. We need help." The man's eyes shifted to the tree line, then back to her face. Whatever he saw there made him holster his rifle. "Get inside, now." Tom McKenzie had been living alone for so long that the sound of a child's voice in his cabin felt like stepping into someone else's dream. The woman, Shyman, Kate, she'd said her name was Kate, sat by his fire with the little girl pressed against her side, both of them shivering despite the warmth. He poured coffee with hands that had steadied in dangerous situations more times than he could count. But something about these two made him feel off balance. Maybe it was the way the child looked at him with trust he wasn't sure he deserved. Maybe it was the fear in the woman's eyes that ran deeper than simple pursuit. "How many?" he asked quietly, handing Kate a cup. 3, maybe 4. They've been following us for 2 days. Her fingers wrapped around the warm ceramic like a lifeline. Tom nodded, moving to the window. He'd chosen this place precisely because it offered multiple escape routes and clear sight lines. Old habits from his Pinkerton days. "What do they want?" Kate's hesitation spoke volumes. Everyone running from something had to decide how much truth they could afford. "My father died 3 months ago," she said finally. "He was Judge Morrison Reynolds, federal judge for the territory. I think he discovered something he wasn't supposed to know." Tom went very still. Morrison Reynolds had been investigating territorial land frauds when he died. Officially, it was his heart. Unofficially, there had been whispers. "And they think you have it, whatever he found." "I don't know what I have." Kate's voice cracked with exhaustion. "He gave me a satchel before he died, said to take it to Governor Warren if anything happened to him. But when I tried to leave Cheyenne..." She didn't need to finish. Tom understood the dynamics of corruption well enough. If someone was willing to kill a federal judge, they wouldn't hesitate to kill his daughter. Lily stirred in her mother's arms. "Mama, are we safe now?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Tom looked at this child who couldn't possibly understand the forces arrayed against her and made a choice that would change everything. "You're safe," he said, and meant it. The men came at dawn. Tom had been watching for them since first light, positioned at his window with a clear view of the approaches. 4 riders, just as Kate had estimated. They moved with the casual confidence of men who'd done this kind of work before. He recognized the type hired guns who asked no questions as long as the pay was good. "Stay down," he murmured to Kate and Lily, who were huddled behind his kitchen table. "Whatever happens, don't show yourselves," the lead rider called out when they were still 50 yards away. "Tom McKenzie, we know you're in there." That stopped Tom cold. They knew his name. This wasn't random. "We're not here for you, McKenzie. Just send out the woman and the kid and we'll be on our way." Tom stepped onto his porch rifle cradled casually in his arms. "Afraid I can't do that." "This doesn't concern you." The speaker was a lean man with dead eyes and a marshal's badge pinned to his coat. A fake badge, Tom was certain, but it would fool most folks. "The woman's wanted for theft, federal crime." "A funny thing about federal crimes," Tom replied conversationally, "usually takes federal marshals to investigate them. You boys look more like the hired help to me." The tension ratcheted up a notch. Hands drifted toward guns. "You're making a mistake, McKenzie. These people aren't what they seem." "Maybe not, but I figure that's for a real judge to decide." Tom's voice hardened. "You want them, you'll have to come through me." The standoff stretched for long seconds. 4 against 1 weren't impossible odds, but they weren't good ones either, especially when the one had cover, or standby cover, and knew how to use it. The fake marshal finally spat in the dirt. "This isn't over." They rode off, but Tom knew they wouldn't go far. Men like that didn't give up easy, especially when failure meant facing whoever was paying them. He went back inside to find Kate staring at him with something like wonder. "Why?" she asked simply. Tom looked at Lily, who was peeking out from behind her mother with wide eyes, and thought about another child he'd failed to protect 5 years ago. "Because it's right," he said, "and because I'm tired of letting bad men win." Kate Reynolds studied the man who just risked his life for strangers and wondered if she dared trust him with the truth. Thomas McKenzie wasn't what she'd expected to find in this remote corner of Wyoming. There was intelligence in his weathered face and a competence that spoke of training beyond what most frontier settlers possessed. The way he'd handled those men suggested experience with violence, but the gentleness he showed with Lily suggested something else entirely. "They'll be back," she said. "I know. With more men." "Probably." Lily looked between them with the solemn expression children wore when they sensed adult fear. "Are the bad men going to hurt us, Mama?" Kate's heart clenched. How many times had she been forced to explain danger to this child who should have been worried about nothing more serious than dolls and games? "Not if I can help it," Tom said before Kate could answer. He knelt down to Lily's level. "What's your favorite animal, Miss Lily?" The question was so unexpected that Lily blinked in confusion. "Horses," she said after a moment. "Well, it just so happens I know where there's an old cabin about 5 miles north of here. Used to belong to a family called Patterson. They had horses." Tom glanced at Kate. "It's well hidden, defendable, and has multiple escape routes. If we're going to make a stand, better to do it on ground we choose." Kate understood the subtext. He was offering to run with them, to abandon his own life and home for 2 strangers. "I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking, I'm offering." Tom's voice was quiet but firm. "My guess is that whatever your father found, it's big enough to kill for. That means it's big enough to matter. Maybe it's time someone stood up, whoever's behind this." Kate felt tears she couldn't afford to shed burning behind her eyes. "You don't even know what you're getting into." "Then tell me." The decision came easier than it should have. Maybe desperation made her reckless, or maybe she simply recognized something in Tom McKenzie that reminded her of her father, a man who believed in justice even when it was inconvenient. She retrieved the leather satchel from her saddlebags and set it on Tom's kitchen table. Inside were documents that had cost her father his life and turned her into a fugitive. Tom spread the papers out, his expression growing increasingly grim as he read. "Land patents," he murmured, "falsified surveys, bribed officials." He looked up at Kate. "Your father was building a case against someone very powerful." "Harrison Blackwood," Kate said. "He owns half the businesses in this territory, And apparently he's been stealing the other half through fraudulent claims. Tom's face went very still. Blackwood. Something in his voice made Kate's blood run cold. You know him. We have history. Tom's words were clipped, controlled. 5 years ago, my wife and son died of cholera while I was away on a case. At least that's what I thought happened. His hand moved unconsciously to touch something at his throat, a locket on a thin chain. Turns out, they might have died because they stumbled onto something they shouldn't have seen, something involving Harrison Blackwood's operation. The implications hit Kate like a physical blow. You think he killed your family. I think a lot of people have died to protect Blackwood's secrets. Your father, my family, others. Tom's eyes were hard as winter stone. The question is, are we going to let him keep getting away with it? Lily, who had been playing quietly with her cornhusk doll, looked up suddenly. Mama, if the bad man hurt Mr. Tom's family, we should help catch him, right? Out of the mouths of babes. Kate looked at her daughter's earnest face and realized that running would only postpone the inevitable. Blackwood had too many resources, too much reach. Eventually he would find them, unless they found him first. All right, she said, the words feeling like a leap off a cliff. What do you suggest? Tom gathered up the documents with careful hands. First, we get to some place secure. Then we figure out exactly what your father discovered, and we find a way to get it to someone who can act on it. He paused. But I should warn you, this won't be easy or safe. Blackwood has money influence and apparently no conscience about using both. What about us? Lily asked. Are we going to be a family now? The question hung in the air between them, innocent but loaded with implications neither adult was ready to address. Kate felt heat rise in her cheeks. Lily, Mr. McKenzie is just helping us. That doesn't make us partners, Tom interrupted gently. We're partners, Miss Lily. People who work together to solve problems. Lily seemed satisfied with this explanation. Kate found herself studying Tom's profile as he began organizing their supplies, wondering what kind of man walked into danger for strangers and then defined the relationship in terms that wouldn't frighten a child. Maybe the kind of man her father had raised her to recognize. The kind who stood up when standing up mattered. They left Tom's cabin as the sun reached its zenith, leading the horses on foot through dense pine forests to avoid leaving obvious tracks. Tom moved with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the land intimately, while Kate struggled to keep up with Lily's smaller legs. The Patterson cabin sat in a clearing that had once been a homestead. Now it looked abandoned, with weeds growing through the porch boards and shutters hanging at odd angles. They died 2 winters ago, Tom explained as they approached. Whole family. Officially, it was influenza. And unofficially, Tom's expression was grim. Officially is all anyone was willing to discuss. Inside the cabin was dusty but structurally sound. Someone had cleared out most of the personal belongings, but the furniture remained. It would serve as shelter while they planned their next move. Lily immediately began exploring her resilience, a constant source of amazement to Kate. How did children adapt so quickly to circumstances that terrified adults? There's something else you should know, Tom said as they sorted through their supplies. I'm not just some drifter who happened to be in the right place. I was a Pinkerton detective for 8 years before my family died. I know how to investigate, how to build a case, he paused, and how to fight when investigation isn't enough. Kate absorbed this information, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. That's why you recognized the signs. Why you knew those men were hired guns. And why I might actually be able to help you get justice for your father. Tom's voice was quiet but determined. The question is whether you're ready for what that might require. Kate looked around the abandoned cabin, thought about the long road that had brought them here, and made her choice. What do we do first? Tom smiled for the first time since she'd met him, and Kate realized with a flutter of something she couldn't name that it transformed his entire face. First, we make this place livable. Then we start building a case that even Harrison Blackwood can't buy his way out of. Outside wind sighed through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried. Kate Reynolds, federal judge's daughter, looked at Tom McKenzie, former Pinkerton detective, and knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The first phase of their partnership began with practical matters, securing the cabin, establishing watch schedules, and creating escape routes in case Blackwood's men found them. But as the sun set on their first day in the Patterson place, Kate found herself watching Tom teach Lily how to identify different bird calls and wondered if this strange alliance might become something neither of them had expected. Something that felt dangerously close to home. 3 weeks at the Patterson cabin had established rhythms that felt surprisingly natural. Tom rose before dawn to check their perimeter and tend to the horses they'd acquired from a sympathetic rancher. Kate cooked meals that were simple but substantial, while Lily collected eggs from the chickens Tom had somehow procured and practiced the letters Kate taught her each afternoon. To any observer, they might have looked like a family settling into frontier life. But the loaded rifles by every doorway and the coded signals they used when one of them left the property told a different story. Tom had spent those 3 weeks methodically reviewing Judge Reynolds' indictments, cross-referencing them with his own memories of territorial politics and the cases he'd worked as a Pinkerton. What emerged was a picture of systematic corruption that reached deeper than Kate had imagined. Blackwood isn't just stealing land, he explained one evening as they sat around the kitchen table after Lily had gone to bed. He's positioning himself to control the railroad routes that will make or break every settlement in this territory. Kate studied the map he'd drawn, marked with red X's indicating fraudulent claims and blue dots showing legitimate homesteads that had mysteriously been abandoned. The pattern was clear once you knew to look for it. The railroad will need water stops, supply depots, town sites. Tom continued, whoever controls the land controls the future of Wyoming Territory. Your father figured out that Blackwood was using falsified surveys and bribed officials to claim the most valuable parcels. But why kill him? Why not just buy him off like the others? Tom's expression darkened. Because your father found something else. Something that proves Blackwood didn't stop at bribery. He pulled out a document Kate hadn't seen before. This is a death certificate for Robert Patterson, the man who owned this cabin. Cause of death, influenza. Kate looked at the official paper, noting the physician's signature and territorial seal. It looks legitimate. It is legitimate. But look at this. Tom produced another paper. This is a report your father commissioned from a doctor in Cheyenne. He had Patterson's body exhumed and examined. Kate's stomach churned as she read. Arsenic poisoning. The Patterson family didn't die of influenza. They were murdered because Robert Patterson refused to sell his land to Blackwood's shell companies. Tom's voice was flat, controlled. Your father was building a murder case, not just a fraud case. The implications hit Kate like a physical blow. How many others? At least 6 families in the past 2 years, maybe more. Tom gathered the papers with careful hands, which means we're not just fighting a corrupt businessman. We're going after a man who kills entire families to get what he wants. Kate thought about Lily sleeping peacefully in the next room and felt cold fear settle in her bones. We can't do this alone. We need help. Agreed, but who do we trust? Blackwood has bought judges, territorial officials, even some federal marshals. Tom paused. There is one possibility. Sheriff Morrison in Cedar Falls. He's got a reputation for honesty, and his jurisdiction doesn't overlap with Blackwood's main operations. You think he'd help? I think he'd listen. And if we can convince him, he might be able to get word to the right people in Washington. Kate nodded, then asked the question that had been haunting her for weeks. What about after, even if we expose Blackwood, even if he's arrested, what happens to us? The silence stretched between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to address directly. I don't know, Tom admitted, but I know we can't keep running forever. Lily deserves better than that. She deserves a lot of things. Kate's voice was soft. A real home, a chance to go to school, a normal life. She deserves parents who don't have to look over their shoulders every day. The word parents hung in the air between them. Kate felt her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Tom, Ian. A sound from outside cut her off. Hoofbeats on the frozen ground approaching fast. Tom was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. Kate extinguished the lamp and moved to wake Lily, her mind racing through their escape plans. But the rider who called out from the darkness wasn't one of Blackwood's men. Tom McKenzie. It's Ben Morrison. I'm alone and I need to talk to you. Tom relaxed fractionally but didn't lower his weapon. How do I know it's really you? Because I'm the one who told you Martha Patterson was asking questions before she died. And because I know you've been carrying around guilt for 5 years over something that wasn't your fault. Tom exchanged a glance with Kate, then moved to the window. A single rider sat his horse in the moonlight, hands visible and empty. "Come up slow, Ben, and keep your hands where I can see them." Sheriff Ben Morrison dismounted and approached the cabin with the careful movements of a man who understood he was entering a dangerous situation. He was older than Kate had expected, with gray streaking his beard and lines around his eyes that spoke of hard decisions and sleepless nights. "Ma'am," he said, touching his hat brim when Kate emerged from the shadows, "you'd be Judge Reynolds' daughter." "You know who I am. Know you've got half the territory looking for you." Morrison's eyes were kind, but serious. "Know there's paper out claiming you stole federal documents. Know that paper's signed by people who wouldn't know justice if it bit them on the backside." Tom relaxed slightly. "What brings you here, Ben?" "Same thing that brought you, I'm guessing. I've been watching Blackwood's operation for 2 years now, ever since good families started dying of convenient diseases." Morrison's voice was grim. "Problem is, I'm just a county sheriff, don't have jurisdiction or resources to go after someone with Blackwood's connections." Kate felt a flutter of hope. "But you'd be willing to help if you could." "Ma'am, I've been waiting for someone like you to show up, someone with evidence and the backbone to use it." Morrison looked between them. "Question is, what exactly do you have, and what do you plan to do with it?" They spent the next hour going through Judge Reynolds' documents with Tom adding his own insights, and Morrison filling in gaps about local politics and Blackwood's network of influence. "This is bigger than I thought," Morrison admitted when they finished. "He's not just stealing land. He's building a criminal empire that'll control this whole territory." "Can we stop him?" Kate asked. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe, but it'll take more than just evidence. Blackwood's got too many people in his pocket. We need to force his hand, make him do something that exposes him publicly." "What do you have in mind?" "There's a territorial assembly meeting in Cheyenne next month. All the major landowners and officials will be there along with railroad representatives from back east." Morrison's eyes glinted. "If we could get your father's evidence presented at that meeting." "Blackwood would have to respond," Tom finished. "And whatever he does, he'd have to do it in front of witnesses he can't all buy off." Kate felt excitement building, tempered by realistic caution. "It's dangerous. He'll know we're coming. That's why we don't just walk in the front door." Tom was already thinking tactically. "We need allies in place, backup plans, and enough public pressure that Blackwood can't just make us disappear." "I might be able to help with that," Morrison said. "I know some people, honest people who've been waiting for a chance to take Blackwood down." They talked until dawn, refining their plan and identifying the resources they'd need. When Morrison finally rode away, Kate felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. But hope, she was learning, could be as dangerous as despair. 2 days later, Lily made a discovery that changed everything. She was playing in the cabin's root cellar, a game that involved pretending to be a pioneer storing supplies for winter, when she noticed that one of the stone walls sounded hollow when she knocked on it. "Mama, Mr. Tom, there's something behind this wall." Kate and Tom found her in the cellar, pressing her ear to a section of stonework that did indeed sound different from the rest. Tom ran his hands over the stones, finding the subtle differences that indicated a hidden compartment. With Kate as help, he carefully removed several stones to reveal a wooden box wrapped in oiled cloth. Inside were more documents, but these weren't official papers like the ones Judge Reynolds had collected. These were personal letters, journal entries, and a detailed map of Blackwood's operation written in Robert Patterson's careful hand. He knew, Kate breathed as she read, Robert Patterson knew Blackwood was going to kill him, so he documented everything. Tom studied Patterson's map, comparing it to their own intelligence. "Look at this. He's identified Blackwood's entire network. The officials who take bribes, the hired guns who do his dirty work, even the businesses that launder his money." But it was Lily who found the most important item in the box, a small leather journal tied with ribbon. "What's this one, Mama?" Kate opened the journal and felt her world tilt. The writing inside wasn't Robert Patterson's. It was her father's in a hand she'd known since childhood. "It's a record of their correspondence," she whispered. "Papa and Robert Patterson were working together. They'd been investigating Blackwood for over a year." Tom leaned over her shoulder to read, and Kate was suddenly aware of his closeness, the warmth of his body beside hers. Focus, she told herself. This wasn't the time for such thoughts. But the journal contained more than just investigation notes. It contained her father's personal thoughts about the case, his fears for Kate's safety, and his growing certainty that Blackwood would eventually come for them both. If something happens to me, one entry read, Kate must get these documents to Governor Warren. She's stronger than she knows and smarter than I ever gave her credit for. I pray she finds allies worthy of her trust. Kate's throat tightened. Her father had known he was going to die, and he'd still chosen to pursue justice rather than run. There's something else, Tom said quietly, pointing to the journal's final entry. Tom McKenzie was right about his family. I've confirmed through my own sources that Mary and little Samuel were poisoned, likely on Blackwood's orders. If McKenzie ever learns the truth, he'll be a powerful ally or a dangerous enemy. I pray Kate can find him if the worst happens. The silence in the cellar was profound. Tom's face was pale, his hands shaking as he held the journal. He knew, Tom said finally. Your father knew Blackwood killed my family, and he was going to tell me. Kate reached out instinctively, covering Tom's hand with her own. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Tom was quiet for a long moment, processing the confirmation of what he'd suspected for years. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but hard as iron. Then we finish what they started. We make sure Blackwood pays for all of it. Lily, sensing the adult emotions swirling around her, moved closer to Kate. Are we still going to catch the bad man, Mama? Kate looked at her daughter, then at Tom, then at the documents that represented so many lost lives and shattered families. Yes, sweetheart, we're going to catch him. The next phase of their plan required careful preparation. Tom rode to Cedar Falls to coordinate with Sheriff Morrison, while Kate used the time to organize all their evidence into a coherent case that could be presented to officials who might actually act on it. But the evening Tom returned, he brought news that changed everything. Blackwood knows we're here, he said without preamble. Morrison got word from one of his contacts. There's been talk in the saloons, rumors about a woman and child hiding out with a gun for hire. Kate's blood ran cold. How long do we have? Maybe a day, maybe less. Tom began gathering in their essential supplies with practiced efficiency. We need to move tonight. Where? Tom paused in his packing. That's where things get complicated. Morrison thinks our best bet is to head for Cheyenne now ahead of schedule. Get the evidence to Governor Warren before Blackwood can organize a proper hunt. Kate nodded, then realized what he wasn't saying. But traveling to Cheyenne means 2 days on the open trail with a child. If Blackwood's men catch us in the open, he didn't need to finish. Kate understood the implications all too well. Lily appeared in the doorway, clutching her doll. Are we running away again, Mama? The question broke Kate's heart. How many times would this child have to flee in the night? How many temporary homes would they have to abandon? We're going on an adventure, Kate said, forcing lightness into her voice. Remember how I told you about your grandfather? We're going to visit some of his friends. Lily nodded solemnly, then looked at Tom. Are you coming with us, Mr. Tom? Tom knelt down to her level, his expression serious but gentle. Wild horses couldn't keep me away, Miss Lily. They left the Patterson cabin in the dead of night, following a route Tom had scouted weeks earlier. The trail wound through dense forest before emerging onto open grassland that stretched toward the distant mountains. Kate rode behind Tom, Lily secure in her arms, their supplies distributed across 3 horses. Every shadow could hide an enemy, every sound could signal pursuit. But as the night wore on and no pursuit materialized, Kate began to hope they might actually reach Cheyenne undetected. She should have known better. The attack came at dawn just as they paused to rest the horses by a small stream. 6 men emerged from the trees with military precision, cutting off their escape routes and surrounding them before Tom could reach for his rifle. Easy now, called their leader, the same fake marshal who'd confronted Tom at his cabin weeks ago. No need for anyone to get hurt. Tom's hand moved slowly away from his weapon. Kate felt Lily tremble against her and wished desperately that her daughter didn't have to witness this. What do you want? Tom asked, though they all knew the answer. The woman and her documents. Mr. Blackwood's tired of playing games. The fake marshal's smile was cold. You hand them over peaceful-like, and you can ride away. No harm done. And if we refuse? The marshal's smile widened. Well, now that'd be unfortunate, especially for the little girl. Kate's protective instincts flared white-hot. No one threatened her daughter. No one. But before she could speak, Tom made a choice that surprised everyone. "All right," he said, dismounting slowly. "You can have them." Kate stared at him in shock. After everything they'd been through, was he really going to surrender? Tom walked toward their saddlebags with his hands visible, moving with deliberate care. But Kate knew him well enough now to recognize the tension in his shoulders, the way he shifted his weight to the balls of his feet. He was planning something. "Tom," she said quietly, a warning, a question, a prayer. He glanced back at her, and in his eyes she saw determination mixed with something that looked like love. "Trust me," he mouthed. Then he dove sideways, pulling a hidden pistol from his boot, and as he rolled, and the morning exploded into gunfire. The gunfight lasted less than 2 minutes, but felt like a lifetime. Tom's dive had scattered Blackwood's men, giving Kate precious seconds to wheel her horse behind a cluster of boulders, with Lily clutched against her chest. She dismounted quickly, pulling Lily down behind the rocks as bullets whined overhead. Her daughter was terrified but silent, the awful stillness of a child who'd learned that survival sometimes meant invisibility. "Stay down, sweetheart," Kate whispered. "Mr. Tom knows what he's doing." She prayed that was true. Tom had found cover behind a fallen log, his rifle now in play. Kate watched him work with deadly efficiency, placing his shots with the precision of someone who'd been in similar situations before. But 6 against 1 was terrible odds, no matter how skilled the one might be. The fake marshal was shouting orders, trying to coordinate his men for a flanking maneuver. Kate realized they had maybe minutes before Tom's position was overrun. She made a decision that would have terrified her 3 weeks ago. "Lily, I need you to stay here no matter what happens. Can you do that for me?" Lily's eyes were wide with fear, but she nodded. Kate checked the small pistol Tom had insisted she carry, then began working her way through the rocks toward the outlaws' position. She wasn't trained for gunfights, but desperation made her bold. The first man never saw her coming. She put the pistol to the back of his head and pulled the trigger, her mind disconnecting from the violence, even as her body executed it. The sound was thunderous in the morning air. Tom used the distraction to drop a second man, shifting position to stay ahead of the return fire. 4 left, but now they knew they were caught between 2 shooters. "There's another one," the marshal shouted. "Find the woman." Kate was already moving, using terrain Tom had taught her to read over their weeks together. She reached a ridge that overlooked the stream, giving her a clear shot at the outlaws below. But as she raised her pistol, one of them spotted her. There on the ridge, bullets chipped stone around her as she dove for new cover. Her shot went wild, but it forced the outlaws to split their attention. Tom seized the moment, rising from behind his log with devastating effect. 2 more men fell before the survivors could react. That left the marshal and 1 other gunman, both now positioned behind Kate's original hiding spot, where Lily was concealed. Kate's blood turned to ice as she realized the tactical situation. The outlaws were using her daughter as an unwitting human shield, knowing Tom couldn't shoot without risking the child. "Come out, McKenzie," the marshal called. "Come out, or we start shooting at rocks until we find what we're looking for." The threat was clear. They'd kill Lily to draw Tom into the open. Kate began moving again, working her way down from the ridge. She had to get close enough to eliminate the threat before they discovered her daughter. But her foot dislodged a stone, sending it clattering down the slope. The surviving gunman spun toward the sound rifle raised. Kate froze, knowing she was exposed, knowing she was about to die. The shot that killed the gunman came from an unexpected direction. Sheriff Morrison emerged from the trees beyond the stream, smoking rifle in his hands, and half a dozen deputized men behind him. "Drop your weapon, Marshal," Morrison commanded, "or whatever your real name is." The fake marshal's head swiveled between Tom's position and Morrison's, calculating odds that weren't in his favor. He dropped his rifle. "Smart choice," Tom said, emerging from cover. "Kate, Lily. You all right?" Kate rose on shaking legs as Lily burst from the rocks and ran toward Tom, her small arms wrapping around his waist with desperate relief. "I was so scared," Lily sobbed against his shirt. Tom knelt and gathered the child close, his own hands trembling with the reaction. "I know, sweetheart, I know, but you were so brave." Kate reached them a moment later and, without thinking, wrapped her arms around both Tom and Lily. For a long moment they held each other in the aftermath of violence, 3 people who'd found something worth fighting for. Morrison approached, his expression grim but satisfied. Got here as soon as we could. Heard the shooting from 2 miles away. How did you know? Kate asked. Tom sent word yesterday about moving the timeline. I figured if you were traveling today, Blackwood's men would make their move. Morrison gestured to his deputies who were securing the prisoners. Good thing, too. These boys were planning to make sure you never reached Cheyenne. The surviving gunman was talking, eager to trade information for leniency. Within an hour, Morrison had enough details about Blackwood's operation to coordinate arrests across 3 counties. But there was still the matter of getting to Cheyenne and presenting their evidence to Governor Warren. We'll escort you, Morrison decided. Full detail official capacity. Let Blackwood try to stop a federal investigation now. They rode into Cheyenne 3 days later like a small army. Morrison and his deputies Tom and Kate and Lily and a string of witnesses who'd finally found courage to speak against Harrison Blackwood. Governor Warren received them in his office, a man whose reputation for integrity had survived territorial politics. Kate presented her father's documents, while Tom provided context from his own investigation. Warren read in silence for nearly an hour, his expression growing darker with each page. This is enough to hang him, he said finally. Murder, fraud, bribery, conspiracy. Harrison Blackwood won't see another sunrise as a free man. The arrest began that afternoon. Blackwood himself was found at his mansion outside Cheyenne, destroying documents in his fireplace when the territorial marshals arrived. He went down fighting both legally and literally. His last words, according to witnesses, were threats against Kate and Lily that ensured his execution would be swift and certain. But even with Blackwood dead and his network dismantled, questions remained about the future. Kate found herself in the hotel restaurant that evening, watching Lily color in a picture book, while Tom spoke quietly with Sheriff Morrison at the bar. The immediate danger was over, but what came next? Tom joined her at the table, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing an expression she couldn't read. Morrison's offered me a job, he said without preamble. Chief deputy, good salary, respectable position. Kate felt something twist in her chest. That's wonderful. You deserve that kind of recognition. Do I? Tom's voice was quiet. I've spent 5 years running from everything that mattered, using guilt as an excuse to avoid living. Tom, let me finish. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. Morrison's offer comes with a condition. The job's in Cedar Falls, which means settling down, becoming part of a community. He paused. It means having a reason to build something instead of just surviving day to day. Kate's heart began beating faster. What are you saying? I'm saying I've found that reason. Tom's thumb traced across her knuckles. I'm saying I love you, Kate Reynolds. And I love that little girl over there who calls me Mr. Tom, but looks at me like I might be her father. The words hung between them, honest and hopeful and terrifying. But, Kate sensed hesitation. But I won't pressure you. You've been through enough, made enough sacrifices. If you want to go back east, start fresh somewhere. Nobody knows your story. Tom's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his fear. I'll help you get wherever you want to go. Kate looked at Lily, absorbed in her coloring, then back at Tom. This man who'd risked everything for strangers, who'd taught her daughter to be brave, who'd shown Kate what partnership could mean. I don't want to go back east, she said quietly. Tom's expression remained carefully neutral. What do you want? Kate took a deep breath, gathering courage for the most important answer of her life. I want to marry you, Tom McKenzie. I want Lily to have a father who'll teach her to be strong and kind. I want to build something good in Cedar Falls, with a man who believes in justice even when it's dangerous. Tom's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Lily looked up from her coloring. Are you going to kiss now? That's what people do in the stories when they decide to get married. Kate laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. What do you think, mister? Tom, should we give the lady what she expects? Tom leaned across the table and kissed her gently while Lily clapped her hands in delight. 6 months later, they stood in a small church in Cedar Falls, while Reverend Busterling, who had indeed turned against Blackwood in the end, testifying against his former employer in exchange for avoiding prison, pronounced them husband and wife. Kate wore a simple blue dress and carried wildflowers Lily had picked that morning. Tom wore his best suit and a smile that hadn't left his face in weeks. Lily stood between them, holding both their hands and wearing a new dress Mrs. Morrison had helped her pick out. Sheriff Morrison served as best man while his wife stood as Kate's matron of honor. The church was full of townspeople who'd come to witness the wedding of the woman who'd brought down Harrison Blackwood and the man who'd helped her do it. But for Kate, the most important moment came when Reverend Sterling asked if anyone had objections to the union. A small voice piped up from between the bride and groom. "I object," Lily announced solemnly. The congregation stirred with surprise and concern. Kate's heart skipped with worry. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she asked. Lily looked up at Tom with serious eyes. "I object to calling you Mr. Tom anymore. Can I call you Papa now?" Tom knelt down to her level, his voice thick with emotion. "I would be honored if you called me Papa, Miss Lily." "Good," Lily said, satisfied. "Now you can finish getting married." The laughter that filled the church was warm and joyful, the sound of a community celebrating new beginnings. They moved into a house on Cedar Falls Main Street, close enough to Tom's office that he could walk to work, with a yard big enough for Lily to play, and a garden where Kate could grow herbs for the healing work she'd begun doing for local families. The transition wasn't always smooth. Lily had nightmares about the gunfight for months. Kate sometimes woke in a panic, expecting to find Blackwood's men at their door. Tom struggled with allowing himself to be happy after years of self-imposed penance. But they worked through the difficulties together, building trust and healing old wounds day by day. One evening in late autumn, as they sat on their front porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Lily made an announcement that surprised them both. "I know a secret," she said from her perch on Tom's lap. Kate looked up from the mending in her hands. "What kind of secret, sweetheart?" "About me and Mama." Lily's voice was matter-of-fact, but Kate felt her stomach clench with anxiety. "What about you and Mama?" Tom asked gently. "Mama's not my real mama. My real mama was her sister, and she died when I was little." Lily looked between them with serious eyes. "But Mama chose to love me anyway, just like you chose to love us both." Kate's needle slipped, pricking her finger. Blood welled up bright against her skin. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "Always, I think. But it doesn't matter, does it? Choosing to love someone is better than having to love them." Lily snuggled closer to Tom. "Right, Papa." Tom's arms tightened around the little girl, his eyes meeting Kate's over her head. "You're absolutely right, little one. Choosing is always better." Kate set down her mending and moved to join them, settling on Tom's other side. He wrapped his free arm around her, pulling her close. "Are we really going to stay here forever?" Lily asked a question that had become their evening ritual. "Forever and a day," Kate answered, the same response she gave every night. "Promise, promise," Tom and Kate said together. Above them, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Around them, the sounds of their town settling into evening. Dogs barking, children being called in for supper. The distant sound of music from the saloon. Normal sounds, safe sounds, the sounds of home. Kate Reynolds. Mackenzie looked at the man who'd saved her life and the daughter who'd saved her heart, and knew that some journeys end exactly where they're supposed to. In the distance, a train whistle echoed across the valley. The railroad that had finally come to Wyoming Territory, bringing progress and prosperity to communities that had survived the harsh early years. Harrison Blackwood had been right about one thing: the railroad would transform the territory. But instead of enriching a criminal empire, it brought opportunity to honest families who'd earned their place through hard work and courage. Justice had prevailed, love had triumphed, and 3 people who'd been lost had found their way home. Forever and a day. Thank you for joining Kate, Tom, and Lily on their journey from danger to safety, from loneliness to love, and from despair to hope. Their story reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we choose, and the strongest bonds are forged in the crucible of shared courage. If you enjoyed this tale of justice and redemption, set against the backdrop of the American frontier, please consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel for more heartwarming stories of love, conquering all odds. What other adventures would you like to see our frontier families face? Let us know in the comments below. And until next time, remember that home isn't a place. It's the people who choose to love you unconditionally.